Keep your eyes on MPT. At 8, hop on over to the Serengeti Park to get an eye full of candid close-ups. Capture photography that will bowl you over when National Geographic peeks into the Serengeti diary. Then at 9, he worked against the odds.
You can't teach logarithms to illiterates.
But he wouldn't take no for an answer.
I'm gonna prove you guys wrong.
James Edward Olmos in the role that earned him the Oscar nomination, and Lou Diamond Phillips star in Stand and Deliver. MPT goes after big game and big names. Tomorrow night, beginning at 8. MPT presents the century's greatest hits. At 9, he led a nation to victory in war. But can he keep peace in a new government?
Conspire against one another behind my back. I'm sick of it.
Barry Bostwick and Patty Duke star in George Washington, The Forging of a Nation. Then at 11, the Union begins to crumble.
We'll leave a lesson at Harper's Ferry for the rest of the South to profit by. Wipe out those fools at the foot of the hill.
And the rest is a lesson in history.
Forward and a gallop!
Ronald Reagan, Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, and Raymond Massey star in the action-packed classic, Santa Fe Trail. See the century's greatest hits. Friday night, beginning at 9 on MPT. The evening news just entered a time warp with Timeline. The scene is Europe during the plague.
The great pestilence, the plague, has broken out again, and still there's no cure.
Now, this MPT national production recreates an eerie history lesson you won't forget. Timeline, Wednesday, April 19th.
You wouldn't think it could happen here, but it did. In the spring of 1942, amidst the panic that followed the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, thousands of loyal Americans lost their freedom. These were the 120,000 Japanese Americans living in California, Oregon, and Washington. Without any evidence of wrongdoing and without a trial, they were rounded up by order of the U.S. government and sent to relocation camps. They left behind their homes, farms, and businesses and spent most of the next 3 years behind barbed wire fences. Now, an exhibition at the Smithsonian Institution explores this chapter in American history and the meaning it holds for us today. According to curator Tom Crouch, the evacuation really had more to do with prejudice than national security.
The individuals who were most responsible for the security of the nation, the internal security of the nation at the time, knew and were convinced that the loyalty of Japanese Americans wouldn't be a problem, and said so, in fact, at the time. J. Edgar Hoover, for example.
2/3 of those interned were native-born citizens. The rest were their immigrant parents and grandparents, some of whom had lived in the U.S. for more than 50 years. For all of them, internment was a deeply personal experience.
I started kindergarten there, and that was very traumatic. I mean, it was really difficult, both because I just felt really alone and just having the experience of not knowing where I am and who I was.
Sand, dust, nothing. Sand, dust, nothing, except these tall paper buildings, middle of nowhere.
But I will never forget the shocking feeling that human beings were behind this fence like animals, and we were going to also lose our freedom and walk inside of that gate and find ourselves cooped up there.
Despite their treatment, many Japanese Americans enlisted in the U.S. Armed Forces and served with distinction. This young officer, awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for valor, was Lieutenant Daniel Inoue.
Some of us had to take extraordinary steps to prove to our neighbors that we were worthy of being called Americans. The price was very heavy. There was much blood that had to be shed. But looking back, I can say with pride that I was part of it.
The experiences of Japanese Americans during World War II are important to remember, as we celebrate the bicentennial of the U.S. Constitution.
What we hope people will take away from this is a recognition of the fact that the words of the Constitution are worth exactly what the great mass of Americans want them to be worth. And things do go wrong occasionally. But the other part of the message is to talk about the way in which we set things right.
The story of the continuing search for a more perfect union, here at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C.
The following is a winner of the high school AIDS video competition.
History never dies. People do. And the cost of ignorance is too dear. The facts you ignored today will still be facts tomorrow. Let's live to make AIDS history. AIDS prevention. Find the facts.
This is Maryland Public Television, serving Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Northern Virginia for 20 years.
This is a Maryland Public Television news update.
Good evening. Governor Schaefer says he has not ruled out calling a special session of the General Assembly. The governor was upset that his insurance reform package failed to get approval during the just concluded 1989 legislative session. However, interviewed on MPT State Circle tonight, the governor said there were many accomplishments this year.
This session, some excellent legislation was passed. I think the non-tidal wetland bill will be a model for the country. A housing bill that was proposed by the administration is another top bill. We were able to put $121 million more into higher education. Put more money into Apex, $63 million, more money into school construction. And I think the thing that I like the most, we provided a very large sum of money to help what I consider the poor, the homeless, the elderly.
At his trial today, Iran-Contra defendant Oliver North said he knew a letter sent to Congress concerning the operation was false, but North said he regarded that a political problem and not illegal. There's still no deal in the proposed Eastern Airlines sale. Peter Uberoth and representatives of Eastern unions are trying to hammer out a final deal before tonight's midnight deadline. Members of the House Ethics Committee are refusing to discuss what decisions they have made, if any, in connection with allegations of rules violations against House Speaker Jim Wright. However, a source familiar with the probe says the panel has concluded Wright may have broken gift disclosure rules. The Senate is expected to give final approval tomorrow to a bill that raises the minimum wage to $4.55 an hour. President Bush has already promised to veto that hike. The bodies of a dozen people have been found in a mass grave across the border from Brownsville, Texas. One victim is a University of Texas student who disappeared during spring break about a month ago. The forecast, a freeze warning overnight, then tomorrow mostly sunny with increasing afternoon cloudiness. Highs will be in the 50s. For MPT News, I'm Ken Manellis. Good night.
This program has been made possible by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by this station and other public television stations. Additional funding has been provided by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. A world of ideas.